Good evening, everyone.
Kavod Harav, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Uh, okay. Yeah, so it looks like we're going to the next chapter. So here, first of all, let me just tell you, this is Kuf Ayin Aleph, 171. Okay. So it says over here the tour. Amar Shemuel, Ose Adam Tzarachav Bepat. So what does this mean? That a person can do his needs with the bread. So we'll see what that means, right? What kind of needs are we talking about? It says the Bet Yosef, he brings a source, Besot Perek Shelosha Sheachlu, right? It's in this perek, which is Nun Amud Bet in Masechet Brachot. Keman az lahad de'amar Shemuel oseh adam kol tzarcho bepat. So he says, who does this go like when it says that a person can do his needs with the bread? Keman Rabbi Eliezer, like Rabbi Eliezer, v'katav Rosh pasak Rabbeinu Hananel kirabanan. So he says the Rosh that Rabbeinu Hananel paskin like the Rabbanan. So what does that mean? That according to that opinion of the Rabbanan, we shouldn't lean the tray on the bread. So what does that mean? That you shouldn't be using, the bread for your needs, like this kind of a, action. Not proper to do so, forbidden, whatever. And okay. So he says it argues with Shmuel, and therefore he says halacha is not like Shmuel. Why? Because Shmuel said you are allowed to do your needs with the bread. Okay. So then it goes on. Miu, however, the pet bet the Masechet Yom Tov, the second parak of Betzah, Kaf Al Vamud Bet, Amina Anen Sufle Lechiuta ביום הטבע, איך יבדין אלוהו? ומסיק דמטלטלים אגב ריפתא. So it says over there, right, that there was a certain thing that they were carrying, and they were using it, carrying it by way of the bread. So in other words, again, they're using the bread, right, for some kind of practical purpose. Right? So that seems to say that we are allowed to do that, to use the bread for our needs. How do we do that? Right? So that's like Shmuel, right? Who says you're allowed to do that, as we said. Sabira le kishmuel. So you see, it says you see from there that the Talmud holds like Shmuel, not like the Rabbanan, which was like the Rabbeinu Hananel. Ubahag katav ilchata kirabanan. So Bahag also says that halacha is like Rabbanan. Okay, good. So we have two big rabbis, right, who are saying like the Rabbanan. Who's this? Rabbeinu Hananel and the Bahag. So these are both Geonim, from the old school rabbis, right? From the good old days. So Katava Ilchata Kirabanan. So he writes, ואף על גב דאמינן כמן אז לה הדאמר שמואל. And even though we said, right, in this Gemara, that we go like Shmuel, עושה אדם כל צורכיו בפת, כמן כרבי אליעזר, וקיימונן הלכתה כשמואל. And we hold like Shmuel, Hanemile b'midi de lo mais. That's only something which is not disgusting. But midi de mais lo. So now we're differentiating between the two camps over here. The ones who say that it's allowed to use the bread for your purposes is talking about things which are not disgusting, usage which is not disgusting. So what does that mean? It doesn't damage the bread, make it into something disgusting. But if it's not something disgusting, then it's allowed. If it's something which does make it disgusting, so then it's not allowed. That's the way he wants to say over here. Okay, so who is saying all this? This is the Rosh. Okay. So he says, "Aval midi daim advice," but he says something which is disgusting. Lo, v'nired afilu Shmuel moded midi demais asur. So he says even Shmuel, could be that it seems that he's also admitting that something which is disgusting you're not allowed to do. K'demuchach b'Shabbat perek b'met omnin, like it comes out in Shabbat, right? In this perek nun amud bet. Hirkach kaimalan kishmuel. So he says, right, therefore we hold like Shmuel. So what does that mean? If it's not something disgusting, you're allowed to do your needs with it, all your needs, whatever. Okay. So he says, right, that therefore you're also allowed to, right, hold up the tray by way of the bread, using it as some kind of a base, or some kind of support. As long as it doesn't get disgusting. Ad kanashano, right? The Rosh. Okay, that's the end of the Rosh. So yeah, that's a nice rundown of all the opinions here from the Rosh. Let's move on. So it says, V'chen data Tosfot, and this is also the opinion of Tosfot. The halacha k'Shmuel, and the halacha is like Shmuel. Oh. וכי כאמר שמואל במידי דלה מאמיס, אבל לא במידי מאמיס. So he also says, right, that depends on if it's disgusting or not. וכן דעת רבנו יונה, also Rabbeinu Yonah says like that. וכן דעת Rashba, and the Rashba also. So in other words, it seems to be the prevailing opinion, this this approach here. There's also written there in that Gemara, Tan Rabbanan, right? Rabbis taught, right? 4 things were said regarding bread. And menichin basar chai alapat, right? One thing is that the rabbi said, don't place raw meat on top of bread. Ve'en ma'avirin kos maleh alapat. Also, another thing is, don't pass over, right, a cup full of liquid or whatever on top of the bread. So I guess the problem is that we're afraid it's going to spill on it, right, on the top of the bread, and that'll make the bread disgusting. So therefore, right, don't do that.
Does that mean biscuits and gravy are out of the question?
Oh, biscuits and gravy. Oh, okay. Wow. Well, well, I'm assuming, right, that you're dipping the biscuit inside the gravy, right? That's what you're talking about.
And you just kind of pour it on top. You make the biscuits and then you make the gravy and you pour it on top of the
Yeah.
bread.
So, well, if it's meant to be served that way, there's no problem. We're not talking about that, right? We're talking about where it's not meant to be that way, and right. So then you're kind of making it like you're making it into something which is not pleasant to look at, right? Whatever, right? Not pleasant to the senses. But if it's made to be that way, no problem, right? Who can tell you anything? Just the opposite, right? Okay, so yeah, okay, biscuits and gravy. Oh, okay. So anyway, ואין מזרקין את הפת ואין סומכין את הקערה בפת. So another thing they said regarding the bread, that is, you shouldn't throw it. Don't throw bread around. Why? Because it's disrespectful, to the bread like that. Also, as we said, right, don't lean the tray on the bread. So you're using it like, in a disrespectful way again. So these are the things that we learned regarding the bread. So it says, Amemor umor zutra v'ravashe karchu rifta behade adade. So these rabbis, they sat down, right, to have a meal together. Aitul kamayu tamre verimone. So it says that they brought in front of them dates and pomegranates. Oh, so shakal morzutra patak lekame dravashe the istana amar le la savar la mor lehadetanya en mizakin את האוכלים ההוא בפת והתניא כשם. So anyway, right, what happened over here? They brought before them, these fruits, right, as we said, and he so this Rabbi Morzutra, he took from that fruit and he kind of like did something in front of Rav Ashi. We'll see what that means. Distana Rav Ashi distana amar le lo sabar lamor titania en mozarkin drachlein. So he threw it in front of him. That's what it means, right? He took the fruit and he threw it in front of him. So right away, right, this rabbi, gets on his case, right, and tells him, you never heard of this teaching that we have, that you're not supposed to throw fruit around? It's disrespectful to the food. So he answers him, he the pot. So that's talking about bread, right? It's not talking about fruit. We never said that about fruit. כשם שאין מזרקין את הפת, כך אין מזרקין את זורקים את האוכלים. So now he brings up right there, which is the opposite. Meaning to say that it says that just like you can't throw bread, also you can't throw any other food as well. Amar Tanya, but we also learn another braita. That's right. There's another braita which says just the opposite, right? That when it comes to bread, you cannot throw it around, but when it comes to other foods, you can. So he says, therefore, right, there's no contradiction here. What does that mean? One is talking about where it becomes disgusting, and the other one is talking about when it does not become disgusting. So as long as it doesn't become disgusting, right, it's okay. But if it does, then you shouldn't do it. So what does that mean, become disgusting? You guys are following me what I'm saying? So what it means is that by way of throwing it, it's going to become like, damaged, like, so it's gonna start getting damaged, the bread, right? And become disgusting. Okay. So again, right, we seem to find the same answer as we saw before.
To kids, that's quite funny though.
Yeah, could be. Could be. So yeah, so the same answer as we had before, with the other case, which is that it really depends on, if you're making the bread disgusting. If you are, you're not allowed to do it. Otherwise, it's not really a problem. Okay, let's move on a little bit. V'harif katav habraita de arba'a devarim, right? So this brings this braita, the four things that we said, right, regarding the bread, that you're not supposed to do with the bread. וכולי, etc. ואחר כך כתב כשם שאין זורקים את הפת, כך אין זורקים את האוכלים. So then he says, right, just like you're not allowed to throw bread, also you shouldn't throw other food as well. ודווקא מידי דממי, so right, again, so he says the same thing. That's only if it becomes disgusting, right? אבל בידי דממי לממיס, but if it doesn't become disgusting, right, כגון אגוזי ורימונה, וחבושה דתלן בה. So he says, right, there are certain foods, you can throw them and they won't become disgusting, right? So he brings you some examples. What are the examples? Like for instance, egozé, right? What does that mean? Hazelnuts, right? Because they have a nice shell, so throwing them around doesn't really do anything to them. And then we have rimone, right, which is pomegranates, right? And then chavushe, right, which is the chavushim is the I'll think of the name. That's the stuff that looks like they look like apples, but they're harder. I forgot the name. Anyway, so we'll think of it. So he says things like that, which don't get damaged because they have a strong composition, right? They're hard. Um, right. I think, yeah, it's quince. Quince. That's the name, quince. So those three things, right? They don't get damaged because they're hard, and therefore there's no problem to throw it around.
A quince is
Uh,
more related to a gourd than an apple, though, yeah?
I'm sorry.
Isn't a quince more related to a gourd than an apple?
You may be right. Just it just happens to be that it looks like it. I'm not saying it's the same family. Yeah, you may be right about that. I don't know. That this far, I can't go that far. Okay. So, oh yeah. So yeah, but they look like them. That's the thing. There's like a resemblance there. Okay, whatever. So anyway, right? They're really hard. That's the nature of that fruit. They say, that if you want to eat quinces, you have to cook them for like several hours because they're so hard. You got to soften it up. Okay, so yeah. Um, anyway, um, let them velo izkir mimra de Shmuel. So we didn't mention the teaching of Shmuel. Okay, so let's move on. Let's see what else we got here. A lot of material here. Okay, lots of material. Yeah, so it goes on. He brings Rabbeinu Yonah, right? Sorry, the Talmidim of Rabbeinu Yonah. He brings them. And menichin basar chai alapat. So he says, right, that you cannot place raw meat on the bread. Tama de milta mishum de mamis. So why is that? Because it becomes disgusting like that. So he says you can also give a different reason. Because then you'll have to wash it, to rinse it. Because of the blood, you have on the meat there. Another thing is that you shouldn't pass over, as we mentioned already, right, a cup of wine alapat on the bread. As we said, right, it may spill onto the bread. It's going to become disgusting. As we said also, another thing is that we don't clean the tray on the bread. And also same reason, because it's disgusting. So what's the problem, right? So he says, right, that maybe, the broth, right, will get spilled on the bread. מתוך מה שכתב הריף הברייתא סתם נראה שסובר שכמו שאין מניחים בשר חי. So he says, from the words of the Rif, it implies that just like we shouldn't put raw meat alapat on the bread, and mavin kos maleh alapat, and also, right, don't pass over the cup of wine, right, which is full on the bread. Kachu yalacha, that's the halacha shen somchin takiara. Same thing also would apply. You shouldn't lean the tray, right, on the pot, on the bread. So he says, but my rabbi doesn't agree with this. Because we say in the Gemara, that Shmuel said, we already mentioned, right, that you can do your needs with the bread. So he says, but that's, however, only with this, Shmuel holds like that, shehu mutar, that it's allowed. But regarding what we said, that we shouldn't put raw meat into the bread, and we said you shouldn't pass over the full cup on the bread. So he says even Shmuel would admit shehu halacha and that's halacha because she'ena pat maus kolkach כשהמרק נופל על הפת. So he says, you know why? Because the bread is not so disgusting when the broth falls on the bread. כמו שנופל עליו היין, like when it's wine, right? So in other words, the wine makes it more disgusting than the broth. Okay. So it seems he says that midvarav, the Arif Savar, it seems from his words that the Rif holds the letil chatak Shmuel. The halacha is not like Shmuel. Okay. Good. But the Rashba says katab shekadivrei Tosfot nireh. So he says he agrees with the Tosfot. Medivrei Rabbeinu Hai, more than Rabbeinu Hai. Katab en zorkin et hapat v'lo shar ochalin, because he said, right, that we shouldn't throw the bread and also other foods. The mam'ise, because it becomes disgusting. Aval the lamam says zorkin, but it's something which doesn't become disgusting. So we're allowed to throw it, no problem, right? The Rif also says that Adkan Mashma Shesober Shemeachar, so implies that he holds that since Katav Rif, the Rif wrote but dafka midi de mamis only something which is disgusting. Aval midi de lo mamis, if it's not disgusting, kegon egoze verimone v'chavush, as we said, right? Like the nuts and the pomegranates and the quince. Let lan ba. We don't mind of that. We don't have no problem with that. Mimela mashma dechol hane de asar bevraita. So that implies that whatever is forbidden in the Braita, dafka kashem nimasim. That's only if they're disgusting. Bechol bechach with this kind of thing. Aval im enam nimasim, if it's not disgusting, bechach share, then we will be allowed. ולפיכך לא הוא צריך לכתוב דאמר שמואל. So he says, therefore, he didn't need to write that which Shmuel said, עושה אדם בשערך בפת, that a person can do his needs with the bread. ומכל מקום, על מה שכתב שכן נראה דברי רבנו היי. But regarding that which he said, right, that he wrote, that's the way it seems from רבנו היי. והריף שכתבו דווקא מידי דממיס. And the Rif that wrote it, it's only with something which is disgusting. But if it's not disgusting, lo, right? That's not a problem. Kasheli, so it says difficult for me to have behedi aminan achi begemara, because we say explicitly in the Gemara, vechi tale milta bedivrei rabenu hai be'arif. So he says, right, that I have a difficulty with this here. What's the difficulty? That he's going against the simple meaning of the Talmud, and prefers to go like Rabbeinu Hai in the Rif, which seems to be sort of a stretch out of the Talmud a little bit, right? Stretching the boundaries of the Talmud into a different direction. Interesting. ואפשר לומר, דחילן דאנחנו מוראה דאמרי הכי בגמרא סברי להו כשמואל. So it says it's possible to say, that those Emoraim that say so in the Gemara, they hold like Shmuel. Ela hava kaimalan kishmuel. So if we weren't holding my Shmuel, hachi nami lo hava kaimalan kenach Emorai. So then we also would not pass connect those Emoraim. Mechevan de katvu arif veRabbeinu Hai. So it says since the Rif and Rabbeinu Hai wrote kenach Emorai, like these Emoraim, mimela mashma de sfira lehu. So that implies that they hold the halacha kishmuel, the halacha zek Shmuel. Ename. Alternatively, mishum de begemara ava efshar lefarushe. Because in the Gemara it would have been possible to explain the hadim falginan ben mamis belo mamis, that which would differentiate between disgusting and not disgusting. Haino dafka bishar ochalin. That's only regarding other foods. When it comes to bread, though, even though it's not even though it's not disgusting, and zorkin, we don't throw it anyway. So, by the way, why would there be a differentiation between the bread and other foods? Because you know what it is, bread is like a staple. We live on that. So therefore, we're more careful with the bread. It's more like something that we have to sort of like cherish, and be more respectful to it because it's a staple of our diet. When it comes to other foods, listen, we can live without them. It's okay. No big deal. So bread is considered to be, the main food. So you don't want to mess with that. Why is bread, by the way, the main food for us? What's the reason for that? So the answer is because it satiates you, When you eat bread, you come to satiation. And that's why we do Birkat Hamazon only on bread, and not on other things. So, right, bread has, the prominence that other foods do not have. That's the whole thing. Okay, let's move on. So Medivre Rabbeinu Hai, so Bi'arifa, so it says, but from the Rabbeinu Hai in the Rif, Mashma le da pita namikae, they hold, it implies that even it's going also on the bread as well. The mefalginan ben echad yamis v'la the lechad la mamis. We differentiate between disgusting and not disgusting. Rambam Perek Zayin. So Rambam in the seventh Perek Katal Kedivre Arif, he writes like the Rif. The Zeh Leshono, this is the language of the Rambam. En manichin basar chay al pad, right? Again, we don't place right raw meat on bread. Then zorkin tapat, and we don't throw the bread. Velo achatichot, velo ochalim, and also all types of foods as well. Shenem klipim, that they have no shell. Kigon tutim v'anavim. For instance, the strawberries and grapes, v'tanim, right, and figs. Why is that? Because when you throw food like that, which has no shell, it does become disgusting, after a while. So it says, so since all these rabbis hold like the halachas like Shmuel, Rabbeinu Hai be'arif nami hachi svirelu, and also these rabbis hold the same as well. Ledat Rashba, according to Rashba, ulefi zeh gam Rambam hachi sevir aleh. So it's according to this, is even the Rambam holds like that. Hachi naktina. So therefore, he says that's halacha, right? What else do you need? You're all set. Okay, great. So let's move on. There's still a lot more material here. Let's see what we can do. So it says, Rabbeinu be'en, מה שכתב רבנו ואין סומכין בו את הקערה, מה מספחי, אבל למה יסלה. So it says also the same thing, right? To lean the tray on the bread, that also depends on if it becomes disgusting or not. If it becomes disgusting, then it's not allowed, but if it does not, it's okay. No problem. פירושו שאם הוא הקערה מלאה פירות, או דברים כיוצא בהם. So he says, the explanation is like this, that if the tray is full of fruits, and things like that, right, similar, shafiru iplu alapat lo ima'es. So what does that mean? That if they would fall on the bread, right, things like this, it would not become disgusting. Bechach, mutar lismoch, then you're allowed to lean in on that, no problem, right? Ita bepat velo ota bepat. You're allowed to lean on the bread. Velo minan shehu mezalzel bepat. So we don't say that he's right disgracing the bread, as we said, right? You don't want to disgrace the bread. That's the thing. Avalima kiara melea, yain. But it says if the tray is full of wine, things like this, right? Because the things like this, when they fall on the bread, unimas becomes disgusting. And some bepad, so then we shouldn't lean it on the bread. Shema tishamet akera viplu meotam advarim. Perhaps the tray, right, will slip away, slip out, and those things will fall right on the bread. And they're going to make it disgusting. So this is the thing. This is the thing we're trying to avoid. ואף על פי שכתב רבנו יונה, it says, even though Rabbeinu Yonah wrote that Shmuel סומכים בפת קערה מלאה מרק, that according to Shmuel, right, we're allowed to lean on the bread, the tray which is full of soup, לפי שאינה פת מאוס כל כך. So why is that? Because the bread is not so disgusting when you have soup on it. כשנופל עליו מרק, כמו שנופל עליו יין. Like, what happens with wine. And so it doesn't seem right. שהן כן דעת רבנו, that רבנו should hold this. אלא כיוון שהוא נמאס קצת, so rather we say that since it became a little bit disgusting, בכך אין סומכין, so then we don't lean it like that. לכן סתם דבריו לא פירש בקערה שיש בה מרק שרה. And therefore he wrote, right, generally in a general manner, and he did differentiate to say that a tray which has soup is allowed לסמוך על שלקמן, לסמוך אלא שלקמן, to lean on that. Rather, he says later on, כתב בשם הראש, he writes the name of the Rosh later on, שהפת שאוכל בה דייסה, regarding, right, the bread that he eats daisa, which is porridge on that, with that, אינה נמסת, doesn't become disgusting, ונראה שאינה נמסת במרק יותר מדייסה. So it seems he says that it doesn't become any more disgusting in the soup more than the bread. ומיהו אפשר דהתם דמתוך שהיא אוכל. So it says, but however, it's possible to say that that since he's eating ba kamar dena nimeset, that since he's eating that stuff, right, that's why it's not disgusting. But if the porridge will fall on it, it does become disgusting. Same thing also applies to the soup as well. Okay. ורבנו, מה שכתב רבנו, אין נוטלים הידיים ביין. Okay, that's a very different issue a little bit. So let's just stop here and look at the Shulchan Aruch, see what we can get out of it. We got to bring up the next chapter. Kuf Ein Aleph. Right, so let's see the Shulchan Aruch says, Ose Adam tzerachav bepat, as we said, you're allowed to do your needs with the bread, right? But that's only if it doesn't become disgusting. But if it will become disgusting by using it that way, then you're not allowed to do that, right? Asur. So therefore, he says, right, we shouldn't place raw meat on the bread. Ve'en ma'avirin alav kos maleh. Also, don't pass over the bread, right? The cup which is full of wine, as we said, because it may spill on it, make it disgusting. Ve'en somchin bo akiara. Also, we shouldn't like lean the tray on it, right, on the bread. Im hi mele'ad davar. If it is full of something, she'emi pol ala pat imaes, that if it will fall on the bread, that substance, right, it would become disgusting. Okay, let's move on. So he says, ונותנים לידיים ביין. One second. Right, okay, that's good. So now we have the next piece. So let's go back to the Beit Yosef and finish it, Belina there. If not tonight, we'll finish it tomorrow. We'll see what we can do. We'll see what we can do. Okay, so now, right, next piece is the tour says En notrin hayadayim beyain, right? That we shouldn't wash our hands with wine. So we'll look inside the tour to see the whole text. Ben Chai or Ben Mazug, right? So says the tour, doesn't matter whether that wine is right undiluted or diluted wine. Filu netila shen tzorech. Even if it's a washing that is not really needed, still you shouldn't do it. Achila, which is not needed for eating. Okay, that's it. So yeah, let's go back to Beit Yosef. Let's see what it says there about that. So regarding that, he brings a source. Sham plukta de Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbanan. It's a machloket in the Gemara between Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis. V'kaimalan ki Rabbanan. We hold like the rabbis. The Amrei ben kach or ben kach klamar ben chai ben mazug. Right? They hold that what, whether the wine is diluted or undiluted. And notrin mimeno yadam. We don't wash the hands with the wine. V'skimu arosh v'arashba lidvi arabad. So these rabbis agreed with the Rabad. Shepiresh delav netilat yadayim hamachshirim le'achila kamar. So he says that we're not talking about washing that makes you allows you to eat. Dahi netila lekam de palig. So he says regarding that washing, nobody argues with that. Shena ela b'mayim. You can only do that with water. Ela netilat netiut be'alma. We're just talking about washing for the sake of cleanliness. So what's the reason why you shouldn't do this? Because you're destroying the food, right? And we don't want that. Even if he throws it inside the tray, or on top of the tablecloth, that the food in this manner it will not become disgusting or dirty, right? Soiled. But he says, nevertheless, when you have figs that are totally ripe, but tutim and also strawberries, asur mipnei shemitoch shen mitma'achin, it's forbidden. Why? Because since they get squashed by throwing them around. The Rabbi can make them disgusting in front of the people who are eating. But Tadash, Deha, so you should know, he says that Ki Hatak Morzuta Distana Ravashe. Tenu Basar Mevushal. 1 second. Okay, so I guess we'll stop here and we'll continue from here. Bezat Hashem. So we'll continue from Rashi. A little bit before that, maybe even. Mashma, okay, Mashma, whatever. Okay, so we'll see what happens there. Okay, so anyway, thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch. We'll see you right tomorrow, which is Thursday, Bezat Hashem. And have a great night, Bezat Hashem. Laila Tov. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All the best.
Thank you so much.
God bless.
Let's go.